Well, I feel a lot of our playing group have felt this time period has been incredibly challenging, being put under that sort of financial stress in the current state of the economy, but also just the general impact on your well-being if people are looking at moving states for a job, for a new contract, all of these sorts of things where it's a lot for people to try and handle. And I think we're really trying to make sure that we walk this fine line about making sure that we can, enable players hopefully to be able to earn the income they're entitled to, but also really stand strong for what we believe players, are asking for, and also what it looks like for the sport going forward as we hopefully continue to grow the game in partnership.
Are there any elements, Catherine, to yesterday's offer from Netball Australia that you like or agree with or concede on?
I'm not sure. We were actually a little bit confused as to what it was. As Joanna said, we've been negotiating the collective bargaining agreement in totality. We are meeting with Netball Australia tomorrow to discuss and further the negotiations, but that will be to do a deal with the intent of walking into that room to do a deal in totality. And to Joanna's point about thoughts on the players being paid, that could have been done 9 weeks ago. Netball Australia has said they are listening to the players and they need to be paid, and they are struggling, being unemployed. We don't want just words, we want action. That could have been done 9 weeks ago, and as Joanna said, we put a proposition on the table to say to Netball Australia, lock in player payments till the end of January, which will enable us enough time to do a deal, and that was rejected. So for it to be put on the table now is confusing because it was a part deal. I thought a page was missing because there was no reference to revenue share or the commercial arrangement. So it was just a publicity stunt as far as we're concerned.
So what is it about then? Are they dangling a carrot in front of you? What is it actually about?
I think they wanted just to suggest that we've been listening to the players and we'll pay them immediately. But as I said, that could have been done 9 weeks ago, and we are ready to enter the room tomorrow to do a deal.
They did say that they were perhaps willing to make some concessions on this revenue share model. What might that look like?
We'll find out tomorrow.
Yeah.
What are you hoping?
And the players are hopeful of doing a deal in totality, as Joe said. It's never just been about player payments, it's about a partnership model. So we'll need to resolve what the revenue sharing element of that looks like, as well as the balanced commercial arrangements that we agreed to. And we feel like the players have already gone further than is reasonable in terms of the commercial rights that they're prepared to provide the game to deal with the financial challenges it's facing, as well as grow going forward. So I've worked with a lot of athletes across a lot of different sports, and it's been a pleasure to work with the netballers because they care deeply about the sport. They've been extremely reasonable, and I think it's quite right that they find their voice at this point and explain how they're feeling and how this process has impacted on them because of the frustrations that they've had, despite that attitude that they've brought to the negotiations.
In terms of this revenue share model, we've heard from Kelly Ryan saying that they've done an internal report that says that it's not viable. I know that Kath, to your point, that has only been rolled off the diamonds. But I think something that might be worth expanding on is exactly why the two parties are at loggerheads about that specific point, and why there doesn't seem to be an agreement on why that is financially viable.
Yeah, I think if you look at the history of all sports, there's been resistance to share revenue with athletes. In my view, it often comes back to control and power, which has been quite blunt, and some fear that you're not going to be able to do what you want with the cream in terms of the additional revenue that comes into the sport. If you talk to those sports who have adopted a revenue share arrangement, they say that it's actually been a real positive in terms of helping the sport grow and aligning the interests of the stakeholders. So we say to Netball Australia, you've got nothing to fear here. In fact, if we had ever committed to this early in the year, then we wouldn't have wasted our time having these discussions. We would have been focused on working with them to help set the sport up for the future in a really positive way. Returning to break even is something that the players are absolutely committed to, but that can't be at the expense of fair player payments. It needs to be a balanced approach. And if we were to accept that as a condition to revenue sharing, it's effectively a profit sharing arrangement, which is what the players have said from day dot that they're not interested in. So that's the major sticking point.
Ian, you've been involved with player campaigns, part of Elite Sporting Codes, AFL Rugby, for example. Is it shocking to you that a world champion team in that plays and then there's a world leading Super Netball league is in this position where players haven't been paid for 2 months?
It is. It's quite confronting. I couldn't be more impressed with the character of the players. They couldn't have done more from a performance point of view, and it's a shame we haven't been able to celebrate that and elevate the athletes from a marketing point of view, particularly considering the war on talent that exists across women's sport at the moment. So we do feel like it's been a wasted opportunity, but to the players' credit, they're still committed to finalising this deal and growing the sport that they love and care for so deeply.
Catherine, there was some mention of personal legal threats when you guys were speaking before. Are you able to expand on that for us?
Well, that was just part of the letter that we received on Friday evening, an hour and a half before the awards commenced. So it was a threat not just to the players and to AMPA, but also to our very part-time advisor in Ian Prendergast and myself. We were named individually in that letter.
Joe, maybe can you expand on how that made you feel ahead of the awards night to have those threats?
Yeah, I think especially for them to be directly directed to Ian and Kath, who have worked so tirelessly on behalf of our players, was I think it's quite devastating for our playing group. We've been so lucky to have such strong advocates and such amazing people helping us be able to have a player voice. You know, we don't have the full strength of a players association like other codes do in Australia, but the letter that came through just prior to the awards, it is hard to talk about what it means. The Netball Australia Awards is like one of my favourite events. I know, I'm getting emotional about it. It's been really hard, and I think all of us just want to be able to move forward with what we think is fair and reasonable for our playing group. We want to feel like we're valued. We want to feel like we're respected and listened to, and hopefully tomorrow when we're in the room, we'll be able to get something done for our players. Sorry, excuse me.
Catherine, how confident are you that you can actually get something done tomorrow?
We're going in there with an intent to do a deal, so that's probably the best answer I can give you. As Ian said, we think the deal that we put on the table is extremely favourable. It's not a pure revenue share model because we are desperate to get a deal done for these players, because that's the emotional toll that you are seeing right there. I speak to players and have had for the past 9 weeks, and I have had players sobbing. I have had them weeping. Players have slept in their cars. Players have had to move out of their homes and move across the country back to families. That's the toll that this is taking on these players, and it's a very fair and reasonable deal. We've pared it back from a percentage of licensing, merchandise, events, ticketing, whatever, to simply a small share of above forecast sponsorship revenue. Now, to give you an example of that, if the sport is lucky enough through these players to generate an extra $200,000 above forecast, new money, excess money, whatever you want to call it, the players are asking for a share of that. So let's say if it's 20%, $40,000 to the entire playing group of money that they have helped generate that is helping grow the sport, growing its profile. Netball Australia will still have the remainder of that to do with whatever they want, and we simply cannot understand why it hasn't been accepted and why it wasn't accepted a long time ago.
If you can agree on the revenue share model, what's a good number for players' salaries over the term?
Well, so we've already actually agreed to a 3% increase, which is really minor, and the reason we did that quite some time ago was, again, to get a deal done. Their projections of growth are actually greater than that. So in real terms, the percentage of revenue generated by the sport, the players are going backwards in a highly competitive market where all other female sports are on an upward trajectory. So there's a massive war on talent and we need to keep up. So the sport needs us all working together to do what we can to actually remain somewhere near the top of the tree, which we have been for a very long time. But at the moment that's been compromised. So our focus is tomorrow to try and do a deal with what we've already put on the table as extremely favourable, simply to do a deal to help these players who are really struggling.
Kath, we've heard, I've had quite a bit of criticism about the federated model of netball. Do you think that's a contributing factor to members.
Do you want to comment on that?
I think federated models can present challenges for the governing body in terms of aligning the interests of all parties. All teams need to agree to the CPA, so we've been engaging with the teams throughout this process, and a lot of the conversations directly with the teams have actually been quite pragmatic, where we feel like we've made ground, we've been able to better explain the players' position, understand where they're coming from, and strike that balance. So I think there is an opportunity here for netball to get a lot better organised than it is currently, but we need to do better than we are at the moment.
I think it's probably appropriate to raise here that the reports that Netball Australia have done have said that the model but needs to be looked at. Liz's State of the Game report and a report that Netball Australia has put forward is we need to look at the model to make sure that we can keep up with all these other sports. So, you know, we'd like to think that strategically the sport is taking note of their own reports and looking into how can we do better to keep netball near the top of the tree. It's a sport I played, it's a sport that these players love, and we want to do everything possible and partner up with all these entities to help grow the game because we're under siege here.
Catherine, what happens tomorrow if Netball Australia aren't willing to budge?
Then we will meet with our board and get instructions from them and speak to the playing group.
Do you have specific plans for further industrial action?
We'll speak, if no deal's done tomorrow, then we'll speak to the board and get instructions from the members.
Very good. Thanks everyone.
Thanks everyone.
Appreciate your time.
I'll do it.